Thank you for coming, especially given that this is a non-technical talk to a technical audience. I really appreciate you all being here, so thank you, first and foremost. Before I jump into everything, I wanted to quickly ask if, given the context that you know about what this content is about, are there any particular questions offhand? Because this is for you and not for me. I live and breathe this every day, and so yes, I have a lot of content provided, but I'm happy to work in anything that is top of mind for anyone here. So first off, I want to preface this with, is there anything specific that any of you would like to see in this chat today? Bueller?
Just going to cover everything. So
Everything. All right, perfect. No pressure. Let's do it. Awesome. Well, I'm Megan Spaans. I work for Slalom. I'm one of our technical recruiters. The talk today is really going to be centering around finding the right fit for your next career move and all of the things that you need to be thinking about as you're approaching this journey, entering the abyss, if you will. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself. So my why, I actually went to school for film. I'm clearly not doing that anymore. But it really filters into what it is that I'm doing today because I love learning people's stories and helping connect them with their next chapter through understanding their story. We will revisit your why and the significance of that in the context of this conversation towards the end, but just wanted to give you a little preview. Professional experience, I've been focusing on finding, attracting, retaining, and growing technical talent for about 5 years. Some of the companies I've worked at, started my career at Stack Overflow. Then I joined Gusto, went into Galvanize, hence the growing, and then now I found my home at Slalom. So that's a little bit about myself. What are we going to be talking about today? So we're going to be getting to the core. You were either new to engineering and you're entering the job field, or maybe you've been in a role for 5 years and you're looking to make a change, right? Like, what is the process that you go through as you make the decision in your mind and then you decide to go out there, dip your toes in the water, see what there is, maybe enter the interview process? What does this wild, wild west look like? I like to break it down into 3 phases. So ready, set, go is going to be the framework. But there are important questions that we're asking every single step of the way. Number 1 being, what? What is it that we're doing? So exploring the top of the funnel. I know that this can be pretty vague to a lot of folks. You submit an application, it enters the great abyss that is job applications. What happens from there? How do you identify the right opportunities? How do you know what's really out there? What does that process look like? I want to demystify that. The next being set. How? So beyond your resume, how do you distinguish your strengths? How do you establish a voice? And what are recruiters doing to meet you where you're at across these various channels that go beyond a resume? Because it's not just about a resume. And then the last is go. Your why, which I think should always be at the core of everything that you're doing when you're considering a career change, a career move, a career start. Your why is central to everything that you do. So understanding and utilizing your why to find alignment with the right companies, that's how you'll find a fit. So with that, we're going to jump into the what. So identifying opportunity. We're going to talk about job postings. Not always an accurate indication of what is available. I will be the first to admit we are not great at that. A lot of times there's so many factors that go into what an opening looks like that it is not, I looked at a career page and there wasn't anything that was a fit, that's it, end all be all, not the case. Job descriptions, quantitative figures are not a barrier to entry, and I cannot stress that enough, as well as timing. It's such an important factor of everything that plays into finding the best career fit for yourself. Timing is a huge factor. So approaching and connecting, humans over machines always, connecting across the company through different avenues. It's not just the recruiter. The recruiter is seen as the gatekeeper oftentimes, but that's not it, and that's not always the best method. And then leveraging pre-established connections thoughtfully. Sourcing. So going back to how the application process can feel like entering the void, what happens after that? What does the top of the funnel look like? What are all the factors that play into who actually enters the interview phase? So first off, identifying opportunities. This is a really interesting stat. Only 20%, so 80% of jobs are not posted online, meaning that only 20% of open opportunities are actually posted, which is, even as a recruiter who very much lives in that world, a shocking figure. So there are a lot of other variables that are often at play, which may lead to inaccurate depiction of what the opportunities available are. So in terms of that, there's outbound search focus. So a lot of searches are very tailored to, we're looking for a specific type of profile, right? And so inbound applications can kind of open the floodgates. What we do, and it's incredibly outbound focused and very specific, it's a lot of sourcing efforts. And so applications sometimes can feel wide and expansive when we know exactly what we need. So that's a big part of it. External job boards, so things like Indeed, Dice, Monster, they will scrape from any company's community job board and post their jobs externally, opening it up to anyone and everyone anywhere in the world. And so when you think about the gravity of what that can mean from an application inflow perspective, it is massive. So for Slalom, we have 28 locations, and each location has, I have no idea even the figure of the number of open roles technically, but we all have one central applicant tracking system. And so applications that are now open to the entire world, think of the volume of applications that we receive. It can be difficult to allocate time to sift through just the sheer volume. And then the last one is general applications. There are a lot of companies, I'm gonna pull this up quickly if I can. This is something that I really enjoy because a lot of companies will do a posting similar to, yeah, right here. So let's take NAC, for example. We scroll down, we're interested in NAC, only an account executive open. Okay, that's a bummer. I'm a developer. I want something more than that. I love when companies have the get in touch feature because this allows you to provide your information regardless of what's open at the time, because there are so many situations in which timing plays a huge factor. So giving them your information and allowing them to look it over. If you look like a great fit and if you position yourself as a great fit and you align with what they're looking for, there's a very good chance that this company will reach back out to you regardless of whether or not they have an opening when the timing is right. So these are things that I cannot stress enough because it's not about what's posted. So seldom is that the end all be all to what is available. I'll launch back into presentation.
Two over. To your right. It's a little projector.
Thank you. New at this. So don't let any of these things be a barrier to entry. Same goes for job descriptions. Years of experience, in my opinion, that is a loose suggestion. I just don't, it's a very loose suggestion in my mind, like being punctual. 9 o'clock, loose suggestion. I think, when it comes to evaluating job descriptions, job postings, all of that, the more important thing than do I check this box, this box, this box, do you align with the tone and the voice of what it is that they're conveying? And so kind of going back to my previous employment history, Stack Overflow does a really interesting job in the way that they approach their job postings. It's what you'll do, what we're looking for, what we value and what we believe in, right? Like looking for that voice and that tone, I think helps establish a baseline of do we align on the same values and principles? And that speaks so much more to do you check this box, do you check this box? It's a deeper level of connection, which I think is really important. And I think a lot of people get intimidated by, I'm looking for a Ruby developer with 5 to 7 years of experience. That is not, it's not the end all be all. I can't stress it enough. ignore what those figures say. It's a rough idea of, hey, we need you to be roughly this season because these are the type of issues you might tackle, but not an end all be all. Timing's everything. You reap what you sow. Connect, make an impression, and plant a seed, because if not now, if you care about the company enough, if not now, if you make the impression, if you're sincere enough in what it is that you're looking for, if there's alignment, it will come back to you, I promise. Approach and connect. Machines. Not the greatest. So applicant tracking systems are how all of our resumes are funneled in. When you're applying to a job, when you are referred in and you're put into the system, there are a million ways that applicant tracking systems play into the entire top of the funnel, but it is 100% not the approach I would take. The number one tip that I can give folks who are either looking for their foot in the door or looking for a new opportunity, establish connections. So I think reaching out to prospective peers is the number one piece of advice that I can offer. Who is in the role that you're seeking? Reach out to them, invite them to coffee, get curious, ask questions. You will quickly find out if there's synergy. If there is, then that will quickly evolve into a referral. Referrals, on the one hand, lead them to more than likely money, but on the other hand, it's a great way to vet fit and for you to get your questions answered and make sure that this is a fit for you, not only for them, but for you. Also, the other big piece of this is the timing. It plays in again because your prospective peers will understand, yeah, our team is running super lean right now. We're working more than what we had been maybe 3 months ago. I imagine that we'll probably grow another 3, 4, 5 headcount in the next 6 months. I'll keep you in mind. If you build that connection right off the bat, that is the number one tip that I can give people, establishing connections with prospective peers. Best way to get your foot in the door. Next is the recruiter. So I'm guilty of this. We have 28 offices, and we have over 150 recruiters across all of Slalom. We all use the same applicant tracking system. And so it can be very congested. Applications are not the only thing that we're able to look at. Reach out. We're able to find your emails pretty easily. Super creepy, I know. But if we can do that, you can find ours. Reach out to us. A personal note, an email. I would say email over LinkedIn, but sending us a personal note, you will immediately rise to the top of the funnel just because of that, because it's so hard to sift through hundreds and hundreds of applications. Reaching out, giving it a human touch, I cannot stress it enough, it is huge. Next being leaders. I think here at Slalom, we're really lucky in that our leaders are very invested in the hiring and recruiting process. This can't necessarily be the case everywhere because oftentimes when you think of startups, things like that, they're wearing all of the hats. They're strapped for bandwidth. But I will say there are a lot of leaders who are incredibly involved in the hiring process. And it's a big component. And so a non-answer doesn't mean a no. It just means that they probably haven't seen it. But I absolutely think it's worthwhile because I can't tell you how many times I've had leaders here at Slalom reach out to me and say, hey, I got a message from so-and-so. Their profile looks great. Will you please connect with them? So leaders are another great gateway into an organization, especially if you're able to establish yourself in a way that shows that you did your research and you did your homework. And then the last one that I will say is mutual connections. This is probably the lowest on my list of hierarchy in terms of, making that human connection, solely because there are a lot of people on LinkedIn who just want to build and grow their network. It's not always a personal touch. And so the tip that I would give here, be really thoughtful and intentional around what mutual connection you're leveraging. So for example, I've had former coworkers who I respect a lot, worked very well with side by side, reach out and say, hey, so-and-so reached out to me, saw that I knew you, interested in slalom, can you grab coffee with them to just teach them a little bit more? You would be hard pressed to find a time when I would say no to that, just given the nature and the context of our relationship and the fact that I very much respect this person. I've enjoyed working with them. yeah, I'm going to at least find out more. And through those conversations where you're just dipping your toe in the water, finding out more, sharing information, that is how the timing piece plays in. And it may feed you later on, even if it's not a right now. Jumping into the top of the funnel process. So everyone's like, I submitted an application. Why haven't I heard back? That's crazy. As you can see, there are a lot of pieces of this. And so the applicant tracking system is what houses a lot of this. What you'll quickly find is a very small piece of a big pie. So external job boards, so everything from your own careers page, sites that automatically scrape your job postings like LinkedIn, Monster, Dice, as I mentioned earlier. That is everything external that's coming into you. LinkedIn is everything internal that's going out. So LinkedIn, GitHub, Slack. We'll go into a lot of details around that later, but LinkedIn is kind of your outbound efforts. These are all just portions of it. Referrals. So referrals make up over a third of successful hires within a company. Here at Slalom, I would say it's probably over 50%. Referrals are huge so that you understand the context on both ends and is this a fit right off the bat. Referrals are a huge, huge piece of this. You've got internal applicants, people looking to transfer, looking to promote, looking to switch gears in one way or the other. That's another big part. And then job fairs and campus visits. This is heavy flood of just volume, volume, volume. And so all of these pieces factor into the database that is what we have to look at as recruiters. And so it may seem frustrating, right, when you feel like you submit an application and you enter the void. It's darkness. You have no idea what just happened. It's because there's so many factors that lead into that this volume is incredibly high. So I won't belabor the point. I won't go through all of these, but this is a very small encapsulation of what the entire process can look like. So applications, just a little bitty piece. Any questions so far? I want this to be interactive, so if there's anything, please stop me. Yeah, thank you.
You were talking about reaching out with some kind of a personal note for a recruiter or somebody else.
Yeah.
Are you talking about just finding that recruiter's email and sending them an email and saying, hey, I just put in my application, I was super excited, let me know.
Absolutely.
Just something as simple as that.
Yeah, that's one option of many. It can be messaging them on LinkedIn, not my favorite approach, but like just sending an email saying, hey, I'm really interested in your company. Here's why. I submitted an application, would love to talk further. Let me know when you're available. Tee yourself up for success, right? I think a lot of times, people think the application is the end all be all, but 100% not. No, a personal human touch is huge. Yeah.
Might be a kind of a secret question.
No.
Feel free to put it up at the end. So you were talking about earlier GitHub profile.
Yeah.
So recently I've been moving a lot of my older source code that I have ownership of onto GitHub. I've been putting all of that stuff in an organization. So that doesn't show up directly on my profile. Would it be better to have that stuff directly on the profile rather than as an organization?
We'll get there. I will touch on that. GitHub in the past has been a really large part of my sourcing effort because I try and deeply understand what it is that people are excited and working on weekends, evenings, etc. Since the Microsoft acquisition, that's changed a little bit as a lot of stuff has kind of moved to more private. I don't know. It's adjusted a lot of things. We'll dive into that, but I think making available whatever it is that you think puts your best foot forward if you're in the process of a search in any way or making yourself available to opportunities, whatever it is that you're open to putting out there into the public, the right eyes will appreciate it and will, they'll take that as a part of understanding your whole picture. So it's totally up to you. I don't recommend one way or the other. It's pretty specific to your situation, but we'll get into GitHub a bit more. Thought I saw another hand. Yeah.
One more question.
Yeah.
Would you say that in the recruiting world is a kind of a community? If you're looking, I guess the question is, if you're looking for opportunities, you're looking for
Yeah.
role, are you concerned about building relationships with recruiters because they talk to each other? Are
In my personal opinion, I would own that decision for yourself, right? Like, given how actively you're searching, maybe you want to build that network. If not, right, I would find the recruiters or the companies that you feel a particular alignment to instead of just throwing it to the wolves, right? Like finding that fit, finding that alignment, finding that trust and establishing that and carrying that through, I think is hugely valuable and not being bombarded, but it totally depends on the situation. I think it's a case-by-case basis. It never hurts to network, right? I think, again, it really centers on what it is that you're looking for and what your situation is. And going off of relationships and referrals and who you trust and really factoring that in pretty hard. Anything else? Yeah.
So I'm most of the way through quitting boot camp right now and just starting to reach out to a few of the companies that I'm interested in because I've got like kind of a set list that I'm looking at, so I'm not just like spamming a bunch of places.
Yeah.
One of the things I'm trying to do is actually try to set, because our school already does like job shadows. We've got one set up for next week.
Are you at Turing out of curiosity?
And so I'm trying to set up some of my own job shadows too, because like obviously it's really hard for them to get stuff set up for, having like 60 students go.
Sure.
Do you have any like recommendations for like how to go about like reaching out? Because I've sent stuff out to 3 companies so far, and it's only been like a day or 2, so I haven't heard anything back from them yet.
Yeah. I would say, again, it really starts with establishing a connection before really leading with an ask, right? Like, meet someone within the company, reach out to someone who you could see as a prospective peer, or 1 to 2 levels up, right? Maybe not reaching out to the CEO or the director, right? But establishing that connection and building that before you have an ask. And I completely understand and empathize with like the need to shadow. I think for certain companies it's obviously harder. Slalom, for example, right? We're a consulting firm and there's confidentiality and all of that. But I think the biggest piece of advice I can give is, again, going back to that human element and building that connection before you have an ask. It's kind of the same with like a resume. So say you reach out to a leader at an organization, you're having great conversation, you're getting questions answered, it's a good flow, right? Wait for them to ask you for a resume before giving it out, because oftentimes, right, when that happens, they'll kind of be like, okay, when the time is right, they're so busy, they'll probably push it aside. Wait for them to ask you. So build that connection, have the conversation, and then if you're like, hey, so this is something I'm running into, pose it, right, and see if it's a fit, right, before completely asking for it. But I don't have any great advice around shadowing. I think it's really finding the right organizations that have the environment and the structures in place to be able to support and facilitate that, if that makes sense. Because it's pretty company to company specific who can allow that for what reasons and why. So I'm sorry I don't have a concrete answer, but I'd be happy to chat about it more after the fact, because coming from Galvanize, I've run into this a couple times.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So I guess a lot of us here probably have at least a little bit of hacking experience. And almost what you're saying here sounds like we're trying to do some social engineering to get on the inside. How far does that extend to where it is not, for instance, like a creepy thing? Would you find the lead developer on some team, find their Instagram, see what bar they like to hang out at, show up at that, like, you know what I mean? Like,
I don't know that I'm the right person to ask that, since I'm a recruiter and we're often viewed as creepy, but I truly believe that if it comes from a genuine place and you're seeking to understand and you're trying to learn more and you're curious, you're new in your career, it's the first time in a long time that you've been looking for a change, people are empathetic to that. I don't think it comes off as creepy to most. Sure, some people maybe, but I think for the most part, humans understand humans, and it's just a part of the game, right? Like, you're trying to understand, you're trying to learn more.
I guess I'm trying to point out, like, are there boundaries that if you find that this team often hangs out at this bar after work, so do you just show up at that bar? So, like, how deep down that rabbit hole do you get of exploiting those connections?
Again, I think it's kind of a case-by-case basis, depending on the context that you have, what you know. Build a relationship, get a foot in the door. Maybe don't like come in and show up and be like, I'm here at a private party or anything like that. I don't necessarily condone that, but I think it's really about building the relationship, and from there you can feel it out. It's like dating. I mean, you can't just like show up at someone's house and be like, hey, we talked last week, right? You have to, there's building blocks, right? And so it's after that initial point of contact, how is it escalated? What feels appropriate? That's the best advice I can give, because it is pretty subjective depending on the situation.
I was going to say showing up on Adam's porch.
It might be kind of creepy. I don't know if Adam would love that.
But what I do love is when I've had people even from this lead-up reach out to me to grab coffee to find out more about Slalom, even knowing that like they're still very young in their careers typically.
Yeah.
Like we're looking at people for a little bit more experience to do actual get experience to
Yep.
consult people on things. But like we still reach out and got coffee and we talk. I talked with tons of different folks. It happens. And I don't mind responding to them. It's almost what's 15, 30 minutes of my day.
I think from the outside looking in, you'd be surprised how excited and happy people are to have those type of conversations. Everyone remembers where they started or where they've came from. They're happy to have those conversations. Tech is always evolving. The job landscape is always evolving. People are happy to have the conversations. You'd be surprised. It never, ever hurts to ask. As long as you're not pushy, maybe not creepy, I don't know, creepy, subjective, whatever. But it never hurts to ask. Just put yourself out there. Don't be afraid of the rejection. Worst case, someone doesn't respond because they're busy. Worst case, someone says no because they're busy, right? It never hurts to put yourself out there. So,
Basically, be Scooby-Doo and not traffic.
yeah. Thank you, Brett.
There are times where, and you have to acknowledge, especially the leaders that are potentially looking to hire you, that we look at it from a perspective of you're really smart people and we're really smart people, so don't think there's an asymmetry there.
Yeah.
If you present yourself and just let you stand on the laurels that you bring to the table, you're most likely going to be asked to the table and not having to force yourself upon it.
Yep.
So
Those people appreciate the effort.
Exactly. It shows that you're curious. You're seeking to understand, and that is such a, I think it's an undervalued piece of this whole equation of finding the right fit. Getting curious, seeking to understand, and making sure, again, I hate to use the dating analogy, but it's a two-way street, right? It's
Signaling is what I'm hearing a lot here. It's huge on the signaling.
yeah, signaling is a part of it for sure, but I think on the side of the employer, we love to see curiosity. We love to see someone who truly wants to, like, I love the thoughtfulness of, is this a right fit for me? Not just, am I checking all the boxes on your job description? So that's my advice there. So now we move into the how. Some of the pieces that I really want to touch on here, profile, presence, and prospectors. Profile. There are different things that your LinkedIn can provide that your resume cannot, and vice versa, and I think it's incredibly valuable if you know how to leverage both of those parts in unison, but they live in separate worlds. Presence. This is where we get a little bit creepy on the recruiter side, where we lurk, where we find you, but also, all jokes aside, like how you can show your voice, your personality, your perspective outside of your resume or your LinkedIn profile, because it's not the end all be all, it's not all that there is. And then finally, prospectors. Internal versus external, et cetera, recruiters. What does that mean for you? How can you guide your interactions with them in order to truly understand the situation and the outcomes that would come from that? So first off, LinkedIn profile. 97% of recruiters use LinkedIn, but what is shocking is that only 36% of job seekers are active on LinkedIn, when this is everyone's default. This is the go-to, it's the end-all, be-all. This disparity leaves active candidates with a huge advantage. So say you're actively looking, if you're on top of all of these things, you're filtering past so many others who just do not pay attention to this. So some of the considerations that I'll talk through here that I think are advantages to showcase on LinkedIn as opposed to your resume: headline, summary, personality, skills, and endorsement. So this profile right here, is one that I really love because of the simplicity of the roles, right? Like you can see a nice progression. You can get a small but concise summary to give you a little bit of insight. You understand what their role is, where they're at, what their past is very easily at one glance. But we can take a little bit of a deeper dive. So headline. This is huge, especially I think it comes a lot from slalom. When I was first trying to understand slalom, when I was joining, it's like everyone is a consultant. Who does what? I don't understand. This is very confusing. So a lot of times, if your organization or for whatever reason, right? Like if the job title is unique to your company or is vague, you can add details and keywords to your headline in order to have it apply more externally in a broader sense for others. So optimize this headline. I cannot stress it enough. So Slalom, 70 to 80% of our people are consultants. What does that mean? What do you do? Are you a talent consultant? Are you a process consultant? Or are you an engineer who also consults, right? What does that mean? I think that this headline is a really great way for you to be able to showcase what it is that you focus on without making anything about your employment history inaccurate, right? So we've got the title of data architect up here. That's what she spends her time on. But her title is consultant manager. She does the courtesy of providing at least data and analytics, but that is a broad, broad world. There's so many things that could pertain to in terms of what her day-to-day looks like. But just having consultant manager, very confusing. Data architect, that points me in a direction. I understand what it is that she does. And when it comes to the searches that recruiters do on LinkedIn, the number one thing that we see is we get a long, long list of names when we perform a search. It's their name, their headline, and the company that they're currently at. That is what you see, and so that headline is almost more valuable than what your current role is. But it's a good way to distinguish yourself without being disingenuous to what it is that your employment history actually looks like. Cannot stress that enough. Headline is a great opportunity. And then summary and personality. This is a really, really big one. So many times recruiters are looking for searches on end, undone. We'll discuss the summary in further detail later. But there are pieces of your LinkedIn profile that are such a good opportunity, again, to factor in that human element that we were talking about earlier and make yourself stand out. That makes you memorable. Being a human and not a profile is huge. And so one of the examples I have up here, software engineer, entrepreneur, and craft brewer with a passion for code quality, automating tests, and being outdoors. This gives me an idea. This is a human, not a profile. I love these type of features on a profile. I can't stress enough how much this stands out to me as opposed to C#, .NET, blah, 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 like listing off your languages in your summary. Have an identity and be proud of that. You're a human. You're not a number. Showcase that. Another example, kind of stemming from the same profile I brought up earlier. I love living in Denver and enjoying the outdoors and the mountains nearby. I'm obsessed with my dog, traveling, and fly fishing. I would have had no idea that this girl's an amazing fly fisherman. That adds such a human element to a simple LinkedIn profile. It's one sentence, it's concise, 2 sentences, it's concise, but it's a small blurb that adds a human element, and I cannot stress enough how much more easily that makes it to establish a connection, which is huge. And then skills and certifications, obviously, as recruiters, we spend a lot of time on LinkedIn. When we type in our Boolean strings, when we type in our searches, your skills and expertise and certifications are the number one thing that gravitate towards the searches that you're conducting, right? And so being conscious of what's in those skills and expertise areas, maybe listing all of this on your resume is excessive. Maybe there's not enough space. We'll get into more detail around that later, but this is a really great space to showcase these things. LinkedIn, I would say over resume, yes, I want some skills and expertise and certs on your resume, but I want them to be very tailored. LinkedIn is a great place to be a catch-all, especially if you're actively looking. As recruiters do their searches, your profile is going to rise to the top if you're checking X, Y, and Z box through your skills and certs, especially if you have the tallest stack of waffles Guinness World Record, because I search for that every day.
So that should be in that actual job.
What do you mean?
Like those skills and experience, like when you're looking at profiles, like let's say somebody's had 2 jobs or 3 jobs.
Sure.
And their skills and experience, you really don't know what those skills pertain to which job.
Sure. So the way that I'd approach this is, as a recruiter, we perform our search saying, Slalom, for example, we are tool and technology agnostic, so I don't necessarily get to search for certain languages, frameworks, et cetera, all the time. A lot of companies will. So say we're looking for a Ruby on Rails developer, X, Y, and Z. You'll type that into your search. Because you have all of these other things on here doesn't mean that that's diluted by any means. It's the strength of your profile. You'll rise to the top. All of these other things are in addition to, right? It's a nice to have. And so I would say, yeah, I did a search for React engineers. This profile came up. Awesome. Happy to see that this is validated. Snowboarding, not necessarily searching for that. Project management, for us in consulting, that's a nice to have because you have to wear multiple hats. So not sure if I'm answering the question. I would say you don't have to necessarily worry about editing down your skills. I would make sure that they're pretty accurate so that you're not going to be asked about something that you don't actually have. But I think for the most part, as robust as that can be, the more you're going to rise to the top of the searches.
But I give a working example, HTML.
Yes.
You can't leave that off of your
Yeah.
list because if we're searching for a software engineer,
I hope you have it.
it goes into
Yeah.
the table stakes category, and so use that slot for something important.
Exactly. Again, a lot of skills and expertise come from other people giving, like I have roller derby on mine. I don't know how to get rid of it. I've never done roller derby, but try and edit it down if you can.
Because you can recommend things for
Yes,
people.
exactly. So that's what some of this will come from, right? Yes.
That's a double sword.
Would you recommend keeping stuff on there that you've had from previous careers that have nothing to do with what you're getting into now?
Yes. It makes you well-rounded. Why wouldn't you, right? What's the risk in that? So say you came from a sales background, right? And business development is something that you have a handle on. Why to any company would that be a detriment instead of a benefit? It makes you well-rounded. It gives you perspective. We'll get into your point of view a little bit more later on, but I guess is there anything in particular that you're wondering about from like past experience? This doesn't relate to engineering at all, right?
I mean, not specifically.
Okay.
I've actually done sales for
Yeah.
I did a lot of engineering before that.
Yep.
And it's just this stuff that I worked on, it's a very unusual field that I doubt there's anything that will relate to software engineering. It's not impossible, but
It's part of your story. I don't think that there's any need to mask those things. Now, if it's completely excessive and there's 800 skills on here and you're like, none of this is relevant anymore, maybe try and edit it down a little bit. But I think you'd be surprised to find how many recruiters truly want to understand the big picture and who you are as a human, as opposed to do you check these boxes. And so all of those factors are a really big part of what makes you a unique candidate and a well-rounded candidate.
I have a candidate once, just a new, fairly junior developer, but had done 15 or 20 years in the business. And it was an area where you're looking at what they bring to the table, and there's a lot of deep systems thinking that's just kind of innately comes from where they came from. That if you just assess them on that 2 or 3 years with a developer engineering experience,
Yep.
they'll probably be passed over. But very quickly was able to pivot that individual into a rock star because they bring that background. So
Totally. Could not agree more. And we'll go further into that as we move towards the core of those concentric circles, but absolutely, it's a part of your story, it's a part of your background, it's part of what makes you unique. And I think that's a story worth telling. Is there a hand? Another hand? No? All right. Endorsements. This is a reference without anyone having to make a reference call. So I cannot tell you that, like, anytime I've ever not read through every single endorsement that someone has. I think they're incredibly powerful. And this is something that if you put this on your resume, it's going to seem too verbose. Just don't do it. But on your LinkedIn, this is something that I absolutely recommend leveraging. It's amazing. And it's someone's firsthand experience working with you. That's a huge part of, are you a fit for this company? What is it like to work side by side? What will this collaboration, what will this teamwork look like? Endorsements are fantastic for that. So if you've had a really fantastic experience working with someone, maybe in a freelance capacity, right? Say you're newer to your career and you worked with someone for 6 months, reach out and say, hey, I would love some feedback on LinkedIn about our working experience. Endorsements are references without having to call, which is amazing. Let other people show off for you. I cannot stress that enough. It's one thing to have confidence and to tell that story yourself, but for someone else to tell that for you, it's just incredibly impactful. So I highly stress that. But transitioning from LinkedIn into profile, resumes. These are the things that I recommend focusing on when it comes to your resume. So on average, recruiters scan resumes for 6 seconds. That's what you have to grab their attention because of the volume that they're flipping through. So some of the, oops, I forgot to cover one thing. So considerations here that vary from LinkedIn. This is where you add context. On LinkedIn, I would love to see your job progression. I'd love to see where you've worked. I'd love to see where you've come from. But resumes are where you really add in the context. So this is what I did here. This is what I did here, et cetera. This is the place for that. I absolutely think that there's a home for that on LinkedIn, but as short and sweet as you can possibly keep it. Yeah.
Why do they have HTML on the resume?
I never said it's perfect. Okay. It's someone who was very recently, and this is by no means a dig or a justification, this is someone who is exiting a boot camp and had one full-time role after the fact and was looking for a new opportunity. That was a core part, right, of their education, of their understanding, and it's still integral to what it is that they're coming to the table with, because it may not be as robust as some 20-plus-year engineers.
But they're not including any of their previous non-coding experience in the resume?
Not in this situation, no. Which for better or worse, I think that varies. And again, so if I were to show you this LinkedIn profile, you would see that full story. But for the sake of capturing that 6-second attention span, this is really what we need to know. And so this does a great job of saying, yeah, there's more beyond this, but if I'm gonna grab your attention, this is very clean, it's very easy to digest, very easy to read, and that is going to grab our attention. I thought I saw a hand, yeah?
So he's basically heard from a few people talking about the difference between using like real old, like kind of boring black and white resumes versus like newer ones that have a little bit of color.
Sure.
Is there really a difference as long as it's identical?
This is my own opinion, and I own this. I 100% disagree with having to keep it super traditional. Grab someone's attention. Like I said, you have 6 seconds. Do I want it to be crazy, like Photoshop designy? No, not necessarily. But don't be afraid to set yourself apart. Again, it's about distinguishing yourself. And again, trying to show your personality. So I have no qualms with color, font type, anything like that. But that's me.
How are we on the relatively common practice of people just sticking the resume as an HTML file off their website or whatever? Is it like mandatory that it be stuck in that Microsoft Word or PDF format, or is it reasonable to point people at a link to your resume to HTML?
A link is fine. I would say a PDF is the most digestible format for any applicant tracking system, which is a necessary step. if anything, so if you're just providing someone a URL and they're unable to download it as a PDF or Word, like make it downloadable in some sense because it has to make its way into the ATS somehow, regardless.
Make sure you generate a PDF.
Yep, have the option to generate a PDF. Yeah, because one way or another, we can't take a screenshot and upload that into our ATS. So in order to take away a ton of the legwork, that's super, super helpful. Yeah.
Kind of related, but you mentioned GitHub earlier.
Yeah.
Like, do people actually look at GitHub for that?
Oh, we'll get there, don't you worry. We sure will. But in general, the gist here, context, this is how you add context to your achievement, or context to your experience. Talk about your achievements. Hey, I increased our speed to production by X amount, right? So right here, achieved and maintained 100% test coverage. Any numbers, metrics, anything like that that you can include into your resume, those pop out in those 6 seconds that you have to grab someone's attention and say like yes or no. And then complete contact information. As engineers, you hate LinkedIn most of the time, not to overgeneralize. Oftentimes, LinkedIn, not your favorite, not our favorite, not your favorite. Give us your contact information on your resume, please, so that it eliminates a ton of back and forth. These are things that you can leverage on your resume. You had your hand first.
Lots of resume link when you have multiple jobs and you're looking at the 1-page versus 2-page.
Sure.
Is that still something that you want to consider?
Yeah. As someone who has received up to 24-page resumes, I will say the shorter the better. To me, it speaks to your ability to be concise and understand what matters, right? You're translating, this is everything I've done. There's a depth and breadth of everything that everyone has done in their career. Here's what applies, and I've put in the critical thought to show that to you. Am I a strict 1-pager? Absolutely not. I myself am a 2-pager. But I think what as concise as you can be is the most important thing.
So you're treating your LinkedIn profile as kind of the top of your personal funnel where you're maybe you have a longer list of jobs and you have more
Sure.
potentially and you have more personality
Yeah.
involved in it. But by the time you get into a position where they're actually reviewing your resume,
Mm-hmm.
it should be diced down and more concise and easier to digest.
Yes,
You've already
absolutely.
passed that first barrier of like, all right, we'll spend another 5 minutes on it.
Yeah, so in full honesty, and again, this is my opinion, this is not necessarily general consensus. Your LinkedIn, I would actually like to see it be a little bit lighter because it provides a lot of room for questions, curiosity, et cetera. Provide necessary context. I think resume is where you really add in the context that you find to be truly necessary and truly valuable. But it's a balance, right? I think a lot of people's resumes mirror their LinkedIn's with the exception of some features that one may have over the other. But there's no hard rule, right? It's using your best sense and your best judgment to understand, hey, I've got 6 seconds. How am I going to stand out? How am I going to differentiate myself? What's important? What do people want to know? How am I going to put my critical thought into appealing to my audience?
So where should we put our resume when it's all perfect?
When it's perfect and everything is right? Well, it never hurts to have it on your LinkedIn if you are actively searching. Other than that, I mean, obviously, Indeed, you can upload your resume. That's a big search tactic that a lot of recruiters use. I can see, if I'm searching data scientists within Denver, I can see who has changed or updated their resume on Indeed in the past 2 weeks. The people that are changing and adjusting their resumes, I have a feeling are probably maybe looking. So things like that, put it wherever it is that you feel comfortable being contacted through. But if you're actively looking, put it out there. Put yourself out there. There's no harm in it. But there's no silver bullet, right? It depends on what you want and what you're looking for.
So the summary you described earlier, is that exclusive to your LinkedIn profile, or do you put it on your resume as well? Because at 96 I don't have that.
Again, my own opinion, I pay more attention to summaries on LinkedIn than I do on resumes. Is it great if you have a super concise abstract on your resume that tells your story? Love it. That's great. I'm not super used to seeing it because a lot of people do try and fit a lot of information into one page. But if you have an abstract, great. If it's concise, even better. I wouldn't say have 2 paragraphs of an abstract of, your summary and your story on your resume, but if the shoe fits, it's kind of, again, like open to interpretation and it's subjective, but think about what makes sense in the context of what you're trying to accomplish.
So a lot of us day to day are more probably writing some dialect of JavaScript than writing.
Sure.
Can you speak to the value slash obviously don't use or generally talk to me about resume consultant services? Obviously, when you first put your stuff
Yeah.
up on LinkedIn, you get a lot of people, I'll optimize your profile. Oh, is that an obvious red flag? Is you've seen somebody that's done that that's bad? Like, can you kind of speak to that whole idea of using this third party as a mechanism to sort of optimize to get in here?
It is of my own opinion that, not to make any dig on people who do that professionally and optimize your own profile, but no one knows you better than you know yourself. I think figuring out how to highlight and tell your own story in the most authentic way that's true to you, again, that's going to circle back to that best alignment and that best fit that you'll find with whatever it is that you're looking for and what other companies are looking for. Yes, are there coaching points and tips and tricks to make your profile
So
stand
much of
out?
what you said is kind of like pointing towards back when I was doing marketing for a living. When
Sure.
This is so much marketing. So maybe
It is.
somebody's more used to marketing can help you with those. Is that, or is that obviously like, you can see that somebody's done some fake resume?
If you've got some crazy abnormal like arrows and bullets and all that in your LinkedIn profile, like, yeah, I can tell that someone else wrote that for you.
I'm good about the general case.
Yeah. I think, getting help on your resume, there's no harm in that. If it makes it more concise, absolutely. My best advice is to do that yourself, tell your own story, figure out what makes sense for you, and put the thought into it because it's going to come up in conversation with companies, right? And so if someone else did it for you, will you be able to call on that and justify that as easily? Probably not. But again, that's totally open to interpretation. Nothing else? Cool.
Actually, this might not be the right time for this question, but what about things like, I think, triple byte or I think HackRank is another sort of thing like that?
So those are a lot more like based on what you put into the system versus how optimized for the system I've written.
Yeah. For especially people on the entry level side of things,
Mhm.
are those interesting to look at, or is that more like maybe look at that when you have 5 to 7 years?
So I'm not super familiar with those. If you could give me a little more context, I could probably answer it better, or we can circle back on it after the chat.
Yeah. Triple byte at least, you sort of take these little quizzes or questions to test your knowledge sort of
Okay.
thing.
Yep. Okay.
And I think it might sort of build some invisible profile for you that
Sure.
recruiters can look at.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's, I guess, as much as I've known about that. I did one of the little quiz things and wasn't sure quite what to think of it.
Is this comparable to like HackerRank?
Yes.
Okay, got it. Yeah, I will, again, dive into that in the next section. Not explicitly, but I think building a presence is an important piece, especially if you are newer to the engineering job field.
Yeah.
Whatever you can do to show who you are, the effort you've made, what you're interested in and passionate about, it's helpful.
Would you go as far as maybe putting like a Hacker News link in your resume, or like, what is presence?
We'll get there. And then can we circle back on that after if we don't answer it through the next step? Is that cool? All right, so moving into presence. So beyond LinkedIn. LinkedIn, I view, and I'm sure you all view as a necessary evil. Like it's a part of the job hunt. It's no one's favorite on either end, to be completely honest. So beyond LinkedIn, 73% of companies use social media. And I added the plus because this isn't all social media, but it's things beyond LinkedIn applications that we look at. And this is, again, a better sense to assess fit on both sides. So some of the things that I look at, GitHub, Stack Overflow, Slack is a huge sourcing mechanism, Twitter. personal blogs, websites, and then, of course, meetups. Always dialing back to the human interaction piece. Cannot stress enough. So take a look at GitHub. I am shocked how many people ask me, you're a recruiter and you go on GitHub, do you know what you're doing? What are you even looking for? What are you looking at? You can't possibly fathom how to function a website. But we do. We look at GitHub, at least those of us who do our homework, we look at GitHub because, again, I'm trying to understand you as a well-rounded human individual and not a profile, not a piece of paper. And so GitHub is a big part of it. If you make that readily available, I love it, especially for us. So at Slalom, Sig and Adam can speak to this. One of the main things that we look for in terms of characteristics is, are you a curious, lifelong technologist / learner, right? Like, what is your hunger and capacity to learn? Do you feel like I'm a one-trick pony, or are you so curious that you want to learn everything that you can get your hands on, right? And so I love leveraging GitHub, which I will preface this in saying that since, again, the Microsoft acquisition and a lot of the changes that have happened with GitLab and all that, there are a lot of components. I understand that there are a lot of repos and whatnot that are private, but what is public, especially if you are a newer engineer and you're trying to put yourself out there, a GitHub is a great place to showcase what you're curious about, what you're working on, what you're trying to learn. Another thing I'll mention is that, one, we can learn your email address from this super easily, whether or not you make it available, so it helps us get a hold of you. But aside from the creepy pieces, this is probably one of the biggest pieces that I love to look at, especially for newer engineers, more early career engineers, because it shows me if you're working on stuff on Sundays, Fridays, Saturdays, you're clearly curious, right? Like, you are not just grinding away at your day job. I love to see that there's obviously something outside of your 9 to 5 that you want to learn and that you're going after, and you're being self-taught and self-driven in that. I'm seeing some head shaking. What's going on?
I think a lot of us get home at the end of the day, and we've been programming all day, and man, it'd be fun to program, but gotta work on the house.
Yeah, no, I get it. It's a luxury, and I'm not saying it's an end-all be-all. I do not use this as evaluation criteria. I think, again, kind of going back to this being more catered towards early career folks, if you're experimenting outside of, so say you join a company and you're working in one tech stack and it's the only tech stack that you've truly worked in a professional setting, if I can see or get a glimmer of some things that you're dabbling in your off time, right? Like, I'm gonna dig into that and I'm gonna ask about that because I think it's interesting. It is not an end-all be-all, it is not a necessity, but it gives me a little bit of insight into what it is that you're learning about, what it is that you're trying, and really your curiosity and your appetite. I understand that not everyone can work around the clock, nor do I expect that. I myself have hobbies. I'm a human. I do things outside of work. But it just shows you a little bit of a picture, especially if you don't have as much professional experience to lean on, to be able to say, hey, yeah, I've never used Python before, but I'm experimenting with it. I'm trying to learn. I'm trying to get there. That to me is really interesting. I love to see that. If for nothing else, it helps provide a more informed conversation on that first recruiter interview, because I'm not surface level, I'm not checking boxes, I don't have a script of questions I'm asking you. I want to understand, hey, what is it that you're trying to learn that you've not had your hands on yet in a professional setting? What are you working on? If I can say, like, hey, I saw you dabbling in this, tell me a little bit more about that. What does that, like, self-learning journey look like for you? It's informative in some sense. Again, by no means an end-all be-all, not an evaluation criteria. But if you're trying to put yourself out there, it can be valuable. You were first in the back.
I guess, is there any distinction between or value placed on self-learning versus some formal education, camps or college classes or things like that? Everything else being equal, so if he has the same skills but they learn them themselves.
Yeah.
Everything else is equal versus somebody who went to a boot camp and are on the same
Yep.
page. Is there a preference? Is there something you're like one is more impressive or more comforting?
There's no hard and fast rule to any of this. That's the thing. I can't describe the number of different profiles, individuals that have been incredibly successful in any of the companies that I've worked at. I think so much of it is about you as an individual. There's no one thing that trumps the other. It's really a case-by-case individual basis, and I hate to give you a super, super great answer, but that's honestly the truth. It's how are you applying these things? How are you absorbing them? How are you utilizing and leveraging them? I don't rank a boot camp over self-driven learning or a degree over one or the other, right? Like, I think it's really about the full picture, and it's a space to dig into. But just seeing that you're curious and that you're learning and that you're trying, to me, is a pro. It's a positive. And I understand not everyone can do that, but I think it absolutely helps. It paints a picture. And it provides a foundation for asking questions and understanding. Yes.
So all of my professional coding was on a private repository.
Exactly. Yep.
So
Totally.
So it looks like there's a chunk of time where
Yep.
I'm doing literally nothing.
Totally.
On
Yes.
GitHub. How do you speak to that?
I, especially now, I do not judge anyone at all if there's nothing, if it's completely empty. I creeped on most of my friends on our product engineering team. A lot of it shows nothing, right? Because it is private repos. I very much understand that. But I think this is more so catered to those early career folks, maybe coming out of boot camps, who you're trying to put your best foot forward when you don't have a ton of professional experience to lean on. This is a great way to show the efforts that you're making and what your curiosities and interests are. It is by no means a barrier to entry at all. I cannot stress that enough. It's a nice to have, it's a plus one, but it is by no means a barrier to entry. I completely understand most people spend all day, all night in their private repos for their companies, and I get that. So yeah, it's just a nice to have if you don't have a ton of other stuff to showcase. This is a great way to show who you are and what your interests and curiosities are. That's it. Yeah.
Do you search people on Google?
X-ray searches? Yeah, where you, yep.
Just put in their name,
Oh.
or do you just look at the links they provide?
I mean, sometimes, so there's a technique called X-ray searching, which recruiters use, where you'll do site, Stack Overflow, space, Java, and or JavaScript, and or this and that, the other, right? So sometimes I'll leverage Google. It's a little bit too vast for the tailored searches I try and do, but sometimes.
The hiring managers do?
No, not that I've worked with. They're not doing their Google searches. No, not often. Kind of with this whole conversation, a lot of people have an opinion about recruiters being on GitHub, which I very much recognize. Until I was researching before this presentation, because I was a little bit nervous about it, for me, it's trying to understand as much about you as I can to have informed conversations, because your resume and your LinkedIn profile and all of those pieces are a very small part of what makes you a dynamic human. I love to leave that up to conversation. I just like to go into conversation and ask informed questions. So I very much recognize and understand that there are recruiters who've crossed the line with GitHub. There are people who disagree with recruiters using GitHub. For me, again, I cannot stress it enough, it's not a barrier to entry, it's not a must-have. It is a nice to have if there's not much else. So things like this, inserting into someone's code, like, it's gonna be a no from me, dog. I'm absolutely not gonna do that. So I acknowledge that this is not an end-all be-all. It is in addition to. Slack. I love Slack. I'm sure none of you are strangers, at least I hope, to Denver devs. It's a fantastic community. Slack is a great way to leverage your community. I am not often posting jobs in here, but I love to understand what people are looking for. The career advice category is something that I love to be a fly on the wall for, and I'll often DM people and say, hey, here's my perspective. Like, I know that you're asking, I know that you're looking. I'm one of many. Here's my perspective. I just love the camaraderie in the community, and it shows that you have a sense of investment. It's a great way to learn about opportunities, to put yourself out there. Denver Devs, I love, and this is kind of my home base. Ever since I worked at Galvanize, it's just been a really big part of the community. But there are so many others out there. Slack, get yourself out there, find the networks that work for you, and leverage those networks because they're huge.
I got a question specifically on that, because I know for a little bit they were trying to make a switch from Slack over to Spectrum.
Oh.
And the Spectrum thing has kind of been a bit of a flop. I mean, a few people have contributed there, but Slack is still kind of going strong. Where are you?
I did not know about that. In full transparency, I had no idea.
Can we just use IRC?
Slack's all I know. Yeah. So, sorry, I don't have an answer for that.
Well, you answered. Everyone's on Slack.
I love Slack. I don't know, that's where we're at. But yeah, Denver Devs in particular holds a near and dear spot in my heart. But there are so many out there. I also recruit for our UI UX team. The Denver UI UX community, amazing, fantastic. It's a great way to, again, like build those connections, build those relationships. It's not necessarily recruiters always being like, hey, who wants this job? It's a community, and that's what it should be. Leverage that as much as you can. Build that human connection. Cannot stress it enough. Denver Modern Web, meetups, real human connection, nothing like it. Again, a lot of us, we frequent these things, right? So leverage these opportunities, get to know the folks in your community. There's nothing like a human connection. I cannot stress it enough.
I can add, there is a meetup that Denver Dennis does
Yep.
that's just basically developer happy hour.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people.
Yeah.
It was last night, actually.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
So, get out there and network and meet folks.
I mean, tons and tons. When I used to recruit for our Salesforce practice as well. The Salesforce meetups in Denver are incredibly tight-knit. They are consistent. There's so much knowledge share happening at these things. So if not for prospecting for potential opportunities, if you're looking for a change or a new opportunity, build your network, learn from these people. There's so much information out there. Rocky Mountain Angular, there's countless, right? Like use all of these mediums that you have available. This one. It's an interesting topic. A lot of people group recruiters all into one bucket. There are some primary differences. There's no right way, no wrong way. No one is better than the other. But there are some differences that may pertain to you in your search and your situation. So I will briefly touch on this. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on it. But in general, there are agency recruiters who are also known as headhunters sometimes, et cetera, whatever you want to call it. They work for a third-party company who receives job requisitions from other companies looking to bring someone on board, most often for a contract role, where you will come in typically in a staff aug type of setting, which means you are jumping in kind of solo and joining maybe their team on the ground, maybe not. But it's really centering around you coming in, completing a task that's already been defined, it's at hand, whatever. So agency recruiters, headhunters are low base compensation, high bonus. So they are paid for the placements that they make. Oftentimes, the pain point that a lot of engineers feel is that a lot of information is withheld until it comes to the on-site visit, right? Like, who is the client that I'm interviewing with? What is this information? That can be really confusing. It's confidentiality agreements that are established between the agencies and their clients. So that is part of why I think it can be a sticky situation when you say that I'm a recruiter, because everyone assumes that you are being bonused per placement that you make, which is not always the case. When it comes to in-house or corporate or startup or whatever you want to call it, recruiters, you are typically more base compensation. The bonuses that you make are tied on company KPIs, MBOs, right? Like, what are we really looking to solve? Team goals, whatever. It's more focused on quality of hire, right? Engagement, retention. It's a bigger deal because it's not, I'm just trying to get this person here. Again, there's no one over the other. There are places and times for both of these roles to be super necessary and important, especially if you're looking to make a transition, dip your toes in the water, see what it is that you want and what's important to you. But I will say, on the one hand, with in-house, it tends to be a little bit more long-term career-oriented in terms of, I need a 6-month contract to do X, Y, and Z. It can be a little bit more loosely defined, whereas with agency, it's pretty rigidly defined, right? Like, we've got a task at hand and we need you to do it for this amount of time. Again, no right way, wrong way, but those are ways that you may feel an impact being slightly different in your communications with the recruiter, just given their intentions. The last bucket, I want to talk about tying it back to the beginning, how to find the right fit for you. Why I started with my why. I went to school for film. I'm not a technical recruiter. What gives? Why'd that happen? How'd that happen? But it's because I very much am the type of person who loves a balance of right and left brain. I love storytelling, and I love connecting the dots. I love human connection. I love creating a sense of connection and understanding. That is what led me into recruiting. Your why is such an important piece of setting yourself apart as you're going through a job search or interview process. I cannot stress this enough. Know, understand, and tell your story. Own it. Own it completely. If you can follow an arc of, I started out here, yeah, this is an interesting change, but this is why. If you can concisely walk through that and like, here's where I am today, here's what I'm looking for, that is what establishes connection, and that is what will make you memorable, that will make you stand out tenfold over any piece of paper out there. I cannot stress this. Like, this is, if you take away anything from this, it is how to use your story, craft your story, own your story, and connect that and make meaning and find the fit through that connection and that meaning. So this is an example of one of my favorite LinkedIn summaries that has struck a chord with me as a recruiter for Slalom and what we look for. As a consultant, I've had the pleasure of wearing many hats, from the isolated developer to the team technical lead to a solution engineer. Each hat came with either a different technology or architecture, and typically a different project or company. I have no fear of jumping right into a project with the team and ramping up quickly. I enjoy bringing in new ideas and working them into solutions through iterative processes, and believe that prototyping is the key to better requirements and understanding from all stakeholders. And that if we're not learning and developing our people and technology together, can it be considered team building? This speaks to Slalom so much. I saw this and I was like, yes, this guy gets it. He is awesome. But this can apply to anything that you're trying to appeal to. Like, he is not trying to appeal to Slalom. He was not applying to Slalom. I found this and I said, this speaks to our values. This speaks to our mission. This speaks to the type of people who are successful here and who enjoy what they do here. If you can capture this for yourself, if this falls on the eyes of the right recruiter, they will know if there's a connection, if there's synergy between what a company offers and what you're looking for. And it sounds, I don't know, maybe a little bit cheesy, but I think that the summary and the abstract and the way that you tell your own story is absolutely huge in establishing fit. So I'm going to jump into that a little bit. I'll try and move through this somewhat quickly. So at Slalom, we have a storytelling framework. Spark. This is, think of this as, I guess, your own internal phase of figuring out what this means for you, what it is that you're looking for. It's your introspection, right? Like, what am I looking to accomplish through telling my story? What matters to me? What makes me tick? Structure. This ties back to the whole ready, set, go, what, how, why, of when you're approaching a job search or a job change, right? It's not the tactical, it's not the how things come to be. It's at the core of everything should be your why. And it follows a story arc of any classic, like, beginning, climax, resolution. your why, your what, and your wow or how, whatever. So understand what your narrative is, because I think that it does. It resonates with humans on a human level, and it just makes you super memorable. It shows a sense of understanding and self-awareness, as well as plugging it in and tying it to what a company looks for. So a lot of people will go through this and struggle, right? Say you made a wildly different career switch and you decided to go to a coding boot camp and you came from an agriculture background, right? Like whatever your transition was, there's a reason that you made that choice. Take some time and think about it, develop that, and figure out how to tell it. But here are some questions that I recommend as you're going through and thinking about what this means and looks like for you, and make a story out of it, because that is what will make you memorable. So your why, your what, and your how, or wow, however you want to phrase it. Use these pieces to inform your narrative. Going back to this, yeah, absolutely. Good. So going back to this piece, the introspection, laying it out, thinking about it, how are you going to verbalize it, how are you going to share it, and then how are you going to refine it? And so these are some tips that I have, kind of, again, drawing from Slalom, CARE's last bucket. So captivating, approachable, remembered, and energizing. For captivating, hook people right away. We, a lot of times in consulting, will talk about the flip and bang. It's what are you going to approach a scenario with at the very forefront that will beg a question from your audience, right? So hook them right away. Don't give all the information, but maybe say something that's really interesting, and it will generate curiosity, and that will lead into conversation. Approachable. Be authentic and human. Again, the human piece is so important in all of this. I hope if you take away anything from this, be an authentic human, and that will reward you in the situations when it should. Remembered, zero in on the wow moments, right? Like, what are the highlights? What are the peaks? What are the things that you want people to walk away with saying, yeah, I remember that. That will stick with me. And then energizing. Make outcomes tangible and specific, right? Like, you tell your story, right? Here's what I'm looking for, and here's what it relates to your business. Here's how it relates to your business. Those are really, really important pieces. Make it tangible, draw it in, establish the connection. In summation, so your story, right? Your why, your what, your wow, or how. A company's vision, mission, and values, that's their story. Connect the dots with your own story. That story alignment will lead to your fit. And that is how you find true synergy and a natural fit that can be long-term. And it's not a job, it's a career. That's somewhere where you're going to stick around. That's it. Any other questions?
One final question.
Yeah.
When a recruit reaches out to you on LinkedIn, is that basically the equivalent of you spamming your resume to like a million different places? Because sometimes I get random recruiters offering me a job, and then that's like a yes, no. And a couple of times I've been like, yeah, that seems interesting, and they don't respond. And so I'm more like, how are those?
So going back to the presence piece, I think, so this is something that made me feel like I would never fit in an agency setting. I've only been in-house my entire career. I cannot send spammy messages. Look at if they did their homework or not, right? Like what in the message speaks to, did they do their homework? Did they look at you as a well-rounded human? Doing as much research as they can and reaching out to your interests, your strengths, your passions. If it's template, I feel like that's pretty obvious, right? It's a moot point. But sometimes you can tell when recruiters really try and they personalize their messages. That's why I'm super thankful for starting my career out at Stack Overflow. Joel Spolsky is a very big advocate for religiously serving developers. That was pretty ingrained in my brain from day one. And so I want to understand you as a human before I reach out and send you a message. Yeah, well, part of it, like, hey, an abstract about Slalom, will that be recycled? Yeah, probably. Why would I reinvent the wheel on that time and time again? But make sure, take a look and see if they did some research on you, like, hey, I saw you went to this school, or hey, I saw that you've been working on this. I'm interested. I think that that is a big differentiator between, say, someone's spamming at their resume, right? Or if they write a cover letter that's really thoughtful. So, yeah.
How do you, like, as a recruiter,
Yeah.
if you have an applicant who, they like upload their resume into the ATS,
Yeah.
and it parses badly.
Yeah,
Um,
they all do. No matter what, it can be a perfect resume and it'll still parse poorly.
like, how do you still look at them? Because apparently mine is parsing in a completely just like nonsense way.
More importantly, can we see what you see? Is there a way that we can take our
It's,
resumes and upload it to something to see so that we can correct it and iterate on that?
yeah, it's tough because it varies so much from ATS to ATS. I will say, like, the one that I currently use, not super great at parsing. Some are really good, some are intuitive. It's tough. I would say the best way to make sure that it's parsing in correctly is a Word doc. Unfortunately, those tend to be the truest. It can pull the information appropriately, but it's so much to do with your formatting, right? Like, if you write your phone number as XXX dash XXX dash, or if you do like the periods and the spaces and whatever, there's so many factors that can contribute. It's ATS to ATS. There's no silver bullet for that, unfortunately. But you'll still get looked at, right? I mean, it depends, right? Applications are hard because, say for whatever reason in a certain ATS, it shows up as not even a name. And so you click in and you see this resume, but it doesn't tell you any other information. That can be a little bit confusing. So again, it's a case-by-case basis, but I would do whatever you can to make the most important and prominent features stand out. So maybe not having like a big text block at the top that has all of your contact information, right? Maybe have them be like individual parts that don't have a background or something like that. Things that will help the ATS parse it a little bit more easily will probably help your case, but I've used every ATS under the sun, and it's a wild, wild west.
Things from like skills into like the name of
Exactly.
the role, and it was just like this is bananas.
I don't know. Yeah, it's
situation.
crazy.
Like, as a recruiter, like can you pull up the actual resume?
Yes, absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely, 100%. Just as you go through like this big long list, so take Lever or Greenhouse, for example, it will show you a big long list and it'll say first name, last name, role, like title, current organization, past title, et cetera, all this stuff. My ATS now so sophisticated, so I just have to like flip through every single one in almost like PDF form, but it completely depends. People will still look at them. Does it hurt sometimes if there's like not even a name, if your LinkedIn profile isn't pulling in and they can't easily find you on LinkedIn? Those type of things are worth taking into consideration. So keeping it simple often is the easiest play when it comes to ATS system or ATSs, but it totally depends, unfortunately. Yeah.
So when it comes to including links to like GitHub or Medium
Yeah.
profiles and that sort of thing on a resume, do you prefer that those be explicit links or that they be embedded links so that you click through, like, does it matter?
Again, when it comes to I personally don't care. I will do my research regardless. There are so Lever, for example, is the one that I used at Galvanize. That had a really nice system of being able to, for the most part, pull in your links. It just, again, ATSs are crazy. I don't know the rhyme or reason to it.
What about a cover letter?
Cover letter. I would not recommend having your links on your cover letter.
Okay.
They're oftentimes kind of parsed into a separate bucket and will kind of mess up, if anything, the parsing. I recommend having your cover letter either as a backside to your resume if you have to include it as one document, or as a separate document. Yeah.
If you spend 6 seconds on the resume, how long have you spent looking at the cover letter?
So for me, that totally depends. Is it 5 paragraphs of really droney jargon that doesn't have a personality? This is, again, my own opinion. I'm not a big fan of cover letters. I'm not. But if I see some voice and some personality and some tone to it, will I read a cover letter? Absolutely. How often do I see cover letters anymore? Maybe 10%, if not less.
So do you only open 10% of cover letters you receive?
No, I hardly receive them anymore.
Oh, okay.
I'll always open them. Will I read them in full? Probably not. Unless there's something that grabs my attention at the beginning. Most of the time, it just feels like a template where you filled in this role, this company, my name, my interests type of thing, which isn't always the case, of course. Like, if I find a cover letter that catches me somehow, I will. But to be completely truthful, I don't see them very often anymore. And I think a lot of times it is because of the way that ATS is allowed to upload one document. So it kind of depends, but I don't see them a ton anymore. I feel like they're kind of a dying breed. That's kind of how your persona or your, not persona, your presence comes in. I think that tells a fuller picture than a cover letter. Yes?
Kind of a compound question. So, first of all, do ATS systems filter out stuff based on keywords, like if there's not a sufficient threshold of keywords met? And second of all, if they do, does this become like a search engine optimization problem of putting in multiple ones with different sets of keywords, or talk to me about the underlying optimization problem?
Yeah, it's a sticky situation because it's very, very dependent on what the ATS is. I have read, and this is kind of news to me, but I have read that there are some ATSs where they will bring in an AI feature that will help filter out resumes that don't have the keywords that are listed in the job description. 100% not how we function at Slalom. But unfortunately, I do believe it's a reality. I don't know a ton about it because I've not worked for a company that's used an ATS with those features, since that's really been a thing. But I am of the understanding that is a component sometimes. Do I know a ton about it? I don't, and I'm not going to pretend like I do. It's a pretty new thing.
That sounds like it will quickly develop into some sort of like arms race between keyword stuff.
I don't condone it. Again, that's why I always go back to it is about the human element more than anything else. That you can always rest on that. An ATS is only the first step. Again, going back, it is.
Having that internal connection is far superior to any.
It is the first step in a list of many. Like, it's about this much and this much. So, yes, unfortunately, that appears to be a reality, but there's a lot of other ways you can get around a stupid ATS.
Cool.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody.
So, again, thank you, Megan, for putting this on. This is fantastic. For Denver Modern Web, for next time, we are doing package management. So if you've ever been in NPM hell with tons of dependencies and want to figure a way to get out of it, this is a good one to take for, that's going to be on August 7th. We'll probably be hanging out for a little bit. I know Megan, myself, and Sid will be here for the next half an hour or so, just depending on how, what people, if you guys want to talk to us, you can reach out to us. If you have any questions that Megan didn't answer that you remember or want to follow up on, she'll be around to ask those questions. And please eat pizza. There's still a ton of pizza.
I want pizza.
Please eat the pizza. Because otherwise it's going to go in the fridge and people tomorrow will get it. I'm not trying to do that. Please do. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.